Hello, I'm Ward Bell of IdeaBlade with another in a series of videos about the TempHire cocktail reference application. My good friend and colleague Marcel is the chief architect and principal maintainer of Cocktail, an open source framework for end-to-end development of SAML-based business applications. Marcel gave me a guided tour of the TempHire application, and this series is the result. This TempHire project video describes the shell and its view model. The shell is the visual host for application modules called workspaces, such as the home page, about page, and the main staffing resource module. Module coordination, screen navigation, and cross-module communication is also a function of the shell view model, as Marcel is about to explain.
Typically, an application starts with a shell. That's kind of like your container within your application starts unfolding.
Your visual container.
Your visual container, yeah, for everything. And we're looking at the SAML here for the shell, and it's pretty bare bone. There isn't much going on. There is a toolbar that will get rendered at the top, and there is a placeholder for your active workspace, right? It's a content control that just will display whatever your active workspace looks like.
And the workspaces are kind of like those navigation things. So the home would go in here, and the staffing resource would go in here, the about would go in here, and it just swaps.
It's kind of your main modules of your application. They will, each workspace gets a button in the toolbar, so you can launch it.
Okay.
And that's a good place to mention composition. So if you see here, we simply have a content control that's by caliber and micro convention is bound to something called active item, right? So the active item is actually a view model that represents whatever content that you want to have displayed in here, and Caliber Micro will make sure that there is a view found that goes with that active item, and the view that goes with it is actually what's going to get rendered inside of the content control.
Got it. So there must be a shell view model.
There must be a shell view model, of course. So we open that up, and this is how our shell looks like. And this is fairly generic. You can actually use this for your application too. This is a good start for a shell in your own application. It's not in the common project because it is application specific to some extent. But with little changes, you could use this for your own application. So what we see here at the beginning is in the constructor, we're basically composing this view model together with a bunch of additional stuff, right? We mentioned before the shell view has basically workspaces that it orchestrates. And so the first thing we have injected into the shell is the list of workspaces. We don't really specify here the different workspaces, how many they are. It doesn't matter.
Because it's going to be discovered, you're using MEF attributes here.
That's correct, yeah. So Cocktail uses MEF as the inversion of control container, and whatever MEF finds, anything that implements iWorkspace is going to be injected here. So we, as a developer, we can start growing this application, add workspace after workspace, and it simply gets injected into the shell.
Mm-hmm.
We get a toolbar manager, which helps us manage the toolbar, as the name says. We get an authentication service injected, because one thing the shell owns is the login and the logout.
Mm-hmm.
And we get a factory injected that allows us to create login view models. So that's just a view model that has the username and password or that the user needs to enter before we can actually do the login.
That's a pretty typical Cocktail pattern, isn't it? The iPart factory that gives you a factory for creating new instances of a particular type? It's
actually a wrapper, so you'll find this in the common project. The reason for the wrapper is that Silverlight has something called an export factory that comes from MEF.
Mm-hmm.
WPF doesn't have it. It will get it in .NET 4.5, but right now it doesn't have it, so there is no equivalent. So we've wrapped the notion of a factory, of a MEF factory essentially, in this iPart factory that in case of Silverlight it uses the export factory. In case of WPF it talks directly to MEF to get the instance that you want.
But the net of it is that I'm being given something that can mint new, in this case, login view models.
Exactly.
I can create as many as I want,
Yeah.
and if I needed to create as many staffing resource view models as I wanted, it would do
Yeah.
that for me.
Yeah.
Got it. So this is the common
It's a
factory
common pattern for when you need to create multiple instances or you want to control when the instance should be created and you want to be able to
Right.
destroy it afterwards.
Right. Okay.
Okay, so if we walk through here and see what the shell actually does. So we've seen what it's composed of. And then what does it do? It has a start method that will kick off the shell. We'll look at this in a minute. It handles the login and the logout. It does some initialization. And it has some private helper methods there.
And the difference between initialization and view loaded is that you'll only initialize this thing once, but if you came, it's not going to happen, but this is sort of a general pattern. Every time the view is represented, then on view loaded fires, whereas the uninitialized will only call the first time.
And actually, for the shell, the reason it does initialize and on view loaded is when you get the on view loaded, you know that your view is actually on the screen, and we'll see that in a second why this is important. But let's first start with the start method. Actually, let me open up the initialize first. This is a method that we get from Caliburn Micro. So Caliburn Micro, one of the things it does is manage the life cycle of your view models, right? And if you have one-time initialization that needs to take place in your view model, this is the place where it goes, right? You will also see an on-activate and an on-deactivate. Those are the places where you put things that need to happen every time your view becomes active and every time it becomes inactive.
And to your point, there is no view showing yet. We're just initializing the view model,
exactly.
pure and simple.
Yeah, pure and simple. There's no view in place, and as you can see, there's not much we're doing. We're calling a start method, and here is some differentiation where we see again the difference between Silverlight and WPF. A Silverlight app runs within the browser, so the title bar is your browser, right? In WPF, you actually have a window that has a title bar. So we give it a nice display name in case of WPF, so it doesn't look as bare. So then let's look at what the start method does. That's where the real initialization action is happening. It basically sets up the toolbar, right? So we configure the toolbar. The toolbar is made up of different groups, and each group has basically toolbar buttons inside of it. So we'll set up two groups. There's the main group, which is going to have all the workspaces in it, and there's a logout group, which has the logout button on there. The reason we do that is so the logout button is always on the right. Yeah, exactly. So we'll see later on that there's actually going to be groups that can be injected in the middle, right? So we're set up the toolbar, and basically it's just for every workspace that we got injected, we render a button in the main group, right? That's all we're doing. We're grabbing the display name from the workspace. That's one property that the workspace gives us. And there is an action that's associated with the toolbar button when you click it, and in this case it's the navigate to workspace helper method that is in the shell. We can look at that at the end, what it actually does. Logout is the same thing, and the action for the logout button is the logout method that we'll see in a second as well. And then the last thing it does, it tries to find the home screen. And if it finds one, that the home screen is basically a specially dedicated workspace. There's a default property on the workspace that you could say, this is my home screen, right? And then it simply navigates to that home screen. And the navigation is actually asynchronous, so it uses that syntax there to, it's a Caliburn coroutine that handles the navigation. So that's all that happens on the startup. So let's collapse this and look at some of the actions that can be done within the shell. So the first one is the login, and here we see the use of the login factory, which will create a view model for our login, and we throw that up on the screen, and you notice it's doing a yield return, right? So something that's not often apparent is that user interaction is actually asynchronous. If
It
you
sure
think
is.
about it, right?
I'm going to be sitting there waiting, and who knows how long it'll take me to put my username and password
in. Yeah. It's not always obvious, but it's the first asynchronous case that you need to deal with in a typical UI. So we throw up the login view model, and we just wait till the user fills in the username and password and clicks OK. Once the user clicks OK, we come out of the yield return, and that actually will do the login as well. So the login view model actually does the login after the user clicks OK.
So we're either at the end of that, whether they screwed up the password and however long it took them to get in, by the time they get out, they either got in or they canceled.
That's correct, yeah. And so you'll see another differentiation here between Silverlight and WPF. To close a Silverlight application, you just close the browser, right? If the user decides they don't want to log in, they want to close the application, they can't close the window because the login view model is actually a modal pop-up, right? So you can't close your main window. The way you do it is you close essentially the login pop-up without clicking OK. And so we're checking if we came out of it without being logged in, and in that case, we close the main window.
Got it.
Right. Something, again, you don't have to do in Silverlight. The logout does a few more things. It first, again, tries to find the home screen, because basically when we log out, wherever we are, before we log out, we want to navigate back to the home screen. So we close down whatever workspace we're on, we navigate back to the home screen. And then after we're on the home screen, we log out, and we launch the login again, which will bring the pop-up back that asks us for the username and password. That's
and all these yield returns indicate that each time it's going to take a little time to get that job done, and we got to wait until it's completed.
That's correct. Navigating to the home is asynchronous. That takes some time. Logging out actually involves a call to the server, right? It will actually tell the server that we're logging out of the current session, so we have to wait for that before we then throw the login window back up, and again, we have to wait for that to complete.
Makes total sense.
And so let's look at the on-view loaded. So once the view is loaded and is on the screen, we throw the initial login view model up, because that's the first thing we want to do. The user needs to log in. Now we can't display a pop-up before the underlying window is on the screen. That's why we have to do it on the on-view loaded. So we don't actually do anything with the view. Caliber marker does give us the view. You generally shouldn't mess around with the view. We're simply interested in the fact that we can now throw something on top of our main window. And then these helper methods are fairly straightforward. We just find the default workspace. That's what our home screen is. And then the navigation helper method uses the navigation service from Cocktail to navigate from the active view model to a new view model.
Okay.
So that's a service that Cocktail provides, and it's extensible. You can control whether you can navigate away from the view model that you're on, whether you can navigate to the view model that you're trying to navigate to.
And there are reasons why. I mean, you might not want to leave if you've got stuff that hasn't been saved.
Exactly.
And you might not want to let somebody go to something if they weren't in the right current state.
So the navigation service respects the life cycles of view models, and it taps into the life cycle management of Caliburn Micro. And the default implementation does exactly what you just said. If the current view model that you're on refuses to be closed, then the navigation will be aborted, right? And it uses the Caliburn Micro mechanisms to block the closure of a view model.
In the next TempHire project video, Marcel talks about the Staffing Resource module, an example of a master detail screen with nested tabs that is typical of line of business applications. You'll find that video, other videos in the TempHire series, and much more at cocktail.ideablade.com.